Hi, it's Elaine Hamilton Grundy from the Reiki Centre, and this is the third part of a series on resilience. And I decided to really talk about resilience in these terms. To be honest, these are not new concepts that I've been referring to, but because of the situation we're in with COVID at the moment, it seems to be very pressing that we, as a species, starts to move more quickly and more deliberately through our own capacity for resilience. And the way I define resilience is in terms of our ability to spring back or bounce back from difficult and challenging times. And it's also very important that we have a flexibility of thinking. So in the first two videos, I covered that. And this flexibility opens us into the possibility for the creative or inspired ideas and impulses that bring with it the stepping into the next future. So the reason why I'm talking about all this is because clearly we're going through quite a major transformation. And maybe we could have thought at the beginning, well, it's going to be a couple of months, then business as usual. I think it's now becoming more clear to people that it's not going to be business as usual. And the way that we work, the way we interact, and the way that we build businesses is in the process of a shift. And the shift is quite big. So it may well be that in a couple of months there are certain aspects that go completely back to normal. I'm personally hoping that is the case, and that kind of life continues in a way that is recognizable. I do believe that that is going to happen as well. However, there's an opportunity here, and the opportunity is for those of us who are feeling that there is something more. We can reimagine the future. We can reimagine the way that we ourselves are expressing ourselves in this world. There's an opportunity here, as we are all in some form of isolation or some form of having to rethink constantly the way that we're doing things. There's an opportunity for us to be incredibly creative in the way that we grow both ourselves and our work. So in this video, I wanted to talk about that creative or the impulse that comes out of us. And in the previous video, when I talked about flexibility, that's a precursor to this. So the creative impulse, it finds it very difficult to come out and express through us when we are closed down and when we are disconnected with our true essence. So from a Reiki perspective, when I wrote my book, Reiki, A Path to Freedom, these are parts, there's a certain flow. So the first part is really coming into this recognition of self. Like, okay, I am more than my thinking, I'm more than the external world. In fact, my stability, my wholeness is within me. And then that acknowledgement, we start to, from that position, we start to look at the mind and go, well, is this really me? Am I really made up just of a collection of random and fairly limiting beliefs, or am I more? Now, once you start to see that you are more, that your thoughts don't define you, your belief structures do not define you, and when you start to loosen that up, in the last video I talked about just loosening up the knot so that it can unravel itself, then we come into a space whereby we have created more spaciousness. And the importance of spaciousness is that the creative impulse comes from the space. It doesn't come from the mind. We don't think creative thoughts. And if you just reflect on this yourself, like your best ideas will probably have come from the shower, or, lots of people say to me, oh, I was just sitting on the toilet. Excuse me, but that does seem to happen quite a lot. people look, they're walking in nature, or they wake up from sleep, or it's not when you're sitting at your desk going, I need to think about like a really creative solution. No, it doesn't come from these spaces. It comes from an inspired space in between the thoughts that may form then as its own thought, but it seems to come up from nowhere. And that coming up from nowhere can only happen when there's space. When we're like tight, anxious, panicked, like tense, there's no space. It's like, gridlock. And then there's these creative, very, very helpful, often incredibly expansive ideas. They can't come up. They just hit gridlock, and then nothing surfaces. So it's very important to get the order right. So the tip for this video is to actually create more space in order to allow that inspired creative impulse to find space to come up. And the way that I'm going to describe this may feel kind of scary for many of you to try, because it's not really, and particularly if you are leading a team and you're kind of remote working and you want to keep tabs on them, and there's this feeling that you need to control things, because I'm going to suggest that actually the creative impulse comes when you let go of control. And I really mean let go. So the way that I work with it is I will wake up in the morning, and of course I have a general schedule of things I need to get done, and I might have certain admin things that must be done. So I have like a short list of things that absolutely need to be done, paying the bills, things like this that they need to be done on time. But then there are other projects that maybe have a deadline in a couple of weeks, or a couple of, it's an ongoing thing, and I don't necessarily have a deadline, but they're things to do. And these things to do, I give them the space to come into my awareness when it's time to do it. And an example I often quote is actually when I was writing my book. So most of last year I was writing my book, and I would have weeks where I didn't write anything. And then I would have other weeks where I was just writing for 10 hours a day. And these didn't come because I scheduled them. They came because I woke up in the morning and I just, and my little routine is I'll wake up in the morning, I'll make myself a coffee, and I will do some journaling. And as I'm journaling, it's like free writing. I would just journal, I'll write whatever's on my mind. Sometimes it's rubbish, sometimes it's great, so-called inspired things, and most of the time it's rubbish, honestly. I just sit blah, 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 blah. But it's a way of just allowing myself to just offload stuff. And sometimes there's other stuff that comes up as well. But as I'm doing that process, I'm also just watching to see what wants to come up. And that might sound like a weird way of expressing it, but I assume that life is flowing through me. And this is my base assumption, that life itself is running the show. I'm not. And by the I'm referring to the mind and the ego personality. Because obviously the life force is very much me. But it's not the me that we would normally refer to. It's the true essence of expressive life flow. And that, I trust, has a certain evolutionary impulse or movement. And my only job, in terms of my ego or personality, is to just try and navigate and flow with it. What I've noticed is when I flow with it, my life is very easy. And that's not to say it's not challenging, but it has an ease to it, which is different. So there's still external challenges that come in, there's still all kinds of things to resolve and things like this, but within me, there's an ease of flowing with it. And that also creates a great deal of calm. Now, when you're sitting in that kind of posture, what it allows you to do is to really allow the impulse to come up. And I would have days where there was no creative impulse. I would just sit there with my coffee and I'd be writing. Then I would do some meditation, and then I would do some yoga. Then I would go for a walk. And the whole day would just unfold, and I wouldn't sit at my computer and write anything. And full transparency, there was also a part of me going, I don't think this is really, I should put a schedule in, and I should make sure I sit at my desk for 2 hours a day at least minimum, and blah, 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 blah. But thankfully for me, I never really put it into practice. Because when I did, I would just sit there at my desk, frustrated, bored, anxious, stressed. It didn't really serve me at all. And what I also noticed is that if I just allowed that day to pass just happily, then invariably the next day or the day after, or pretty soon, I would sit at my desk. I would wake up, I'd do my journaling, and I'd be like, right. And then I would sit at my desk and boom, 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 and it would all just pour out of me. And I would do like a week's writing in a day. And so I know with the whole challenge of remote working, it's I'm kind of saying, wake up in the morning and yes, of course, get the essential things done. But the bigger projects, just allow the flow and the impulse to come from you. And there might be days when you are taking lots of breaks, and there might be days when you're playing with your dog or doing homeschooling with your kids, or going out, if you're allowed, into the streets to walk. And I guess there's a certain trust in that, and it's for companies also to trust this is where the impulse comes from. And obviously if you're a boss and you're doing remote working with teams, this is the challenge. Do you trust this? And the best way to trust it is to start with yourself. Feel into it. Is this true? And just see what happens. Set yourself a couple of weeks to play with this. Wake up every morning, no agenda, and be honest. So if you start to think, oh, I want to go and sit and watch TV, and that happens day after day after day, really check in with yourself. Is this denial, or is this truly what your life impulse wants to do? My experience when you're really tapped in with life force is it's constantly wanting to create. Life wants to create. It wants to bring things into the manifest world. It's excited by that. It's passionate about that. So it very rarely says, let's go watch some Korean drama. I mean, it rarely happens. Of course, it happens in downtime, but it happens as a moment, now I just want to relax and enjoy myself. That happens to me every day. I sit in front of the TV every day. I love it. But I don't do it for hours and hours and hours. And that's the balance. It's kind of like, okay, am I just zoning out, copping out, or am I really in life flow? And when you're in life flow, because life is exciting, it's moving, you feel very creative, very passionate, very joyful. Even when there's a lot of challenges, even when you're faced with a lot of challenges, there's this bubbling up of excitement that is there a lot of the time. And if that's where you feel you're at, and then you get this feeling that you want to sit and watch TV all day, then I would say just do it. Just because it's not going to last for long if your impulse is truly connected in. But often, most commonly what happens is that you will just be very gently inspired. Okay, I want to work on this next. And then once that's done, I want to work on this next. And then when that's done, and there's a certain movement, and you'll notice that everything gets done and more. So everything gets done, and then sometimes this completely inspired new thought comes in and sets you off on a whole new project, and it's incredible what can really happen. And when I say everything gets done, it's not the same as everything on your to-do list gets done, because that's a cognitive thing. But just notice, as you're working with this impulse, does everything essential get done? And does everything that needs to get done get done? And in my experience, the answer is yes, it does. And it happens in a very effortless way, a very stress-free way. So I'm going to leave you with that and just play with it, play with this idea. And, if you're worried about it, if you're worried about that lack of control, then set yourself a week. You'll see what happens in that week. And then take it from there. So I hope this has been interesting and helpful, and thank you again for watching.